Anyway, looking at the huge screen, I could see that they were still fighting. This time they were up against a big group. 6 death wolves had joined the fray and were assaulting the trio. The death wolves quickly closed the distance at a speed that ordinary humans couldn't react to. They were obviously smart enough to realize that they had to get in close if they wanted to stand a chance. Beyond the 50th floor, even the riffraff had moderately high intelligence. By the way, a single death wolf was rank B+, so if 6 of them were in a pack, things could get ugly fast. Moreover, since it was a dead spirit, it had the characteristic of being immune to physical attacks, unless they were from a holy weapon or a magic weapon. Because their bodies were constructed of magicules, they could regenerate them immediately, even if they were splattered to bits. These were some wicked monsters that wouldn't go down without you taking the right steps to counter them. One mistake and they'd eat you alive, but don't underestimate me, you damn mutts. Yeah, roared the brown-haired guy who had previously been throwing air. This time, he was charging with the terrifying Bardich held high, and brought it down in a wide arc. With a deafening thud, 3 death wolves turned into light particles and disappeared. Oh, that's it. No wonder the terrifying axe looked familiar, it was Minos' Bardich. When it came to unique grade weapons, they, needless to say, had magical powers. In other words, it was a kind of magic weapon, and even the dead spirits could be damaged. The weapon's magical power alone was enough to wound a monster. More to the point, Minos' Bardich was forged out of a very special alloy. As I recall, it was made from mithril, which was a custom alloy combining silver with magisteel. It was a holy type weapon, which inflicted extra damage to dead spirits and the undead. Ah, I muttered, with Minos' Bardich, the death wolves are dead meat. Yeah, that weapon was the one dropped by Gozervaldor pointed out. This guy here seems to be a pretty sharp fighter, swinging that axe like he's practiced for years with it. As we stood there watching their fight, they filled me in on what happened until today. I had a sudden craving for potato chips right about now. By the sound of things, the brown-haired guy had been the one taking out all of the monsters. And from what I saw, I could definitely believe it. That guy was a beast. But then, what happened to all the traps? Regarding that, the black-robed guy discovered them immediately and informed his friends of their positions. Floor 51 was where the most insidious, meanest traps started coming into play, which could kill you on the spot. As I watched, the black-robed guy pointed at the exact places where the traps were hidden. That was his unique skill. His role was vital for conquering the labyrinth. The labcoat guy himself had only engaged one so far. It was in their fight against Gozer. Valdor's explanation didn't make sense, so I asked Raphael San to read the past records from the dungeon. Whatever had happened, it must have been strange indeed. He took out a syringe from his inside pocket and injected his friends with 2 shots. Immediately afterwards, Gozer's movements became sluggish. Did he give them some kind of state-changing stuff? Answer: it is poison. According to the analysis result, the attack that individual Gozer received contained a neurotoxin. The room was filled with poisonous gas, inhibiting movements of individuals who were not resistant to it. Currently, there is no such effect in place. Ah, poisonous gas. He could supposedly mix it up on the spot to suit their opponent. The lame Gozer was a great target for the brown-haired dude. But it was the labcoat guy who delivered the final blow. He took out a shiny silver scalpel from his pouch and slit Gozer's jugular vein with expert precision. This guy was the leader of the 3. Not because he hung back most of the time, but because he was playing the role of their commander. And he was also skilled. It seemed that the spearheading brown-haired man could focus on his attacks, since he knew that the labcoat guy could defend himself if push came to shove. They appeared to be a good, well-balanced party. Just then, I heard a knock on my door. The door opened quietly and Shuna entered. She brought the papers which had the registration information of these 3 people. This is the registration form of those 3 collected at the time of their entry to Tempest. With a bow, Shuna handed me the papers. Shinji, 23 years old, magician. Mark, 26 years old, warrior. Sheen, 17 years old, hunter. Their names and occupation were briefly recorded on this piece of paper. Their hometown was a little country within the empire. It said that they had come to this country to challenge the dungeon, about which they had heard a lot of rumors from the merchants. Well, that was clearly a load of Raphael San showed me the results of the trio's analysis. And just like Beretta had said, they all possessed unique skills. Those 3 had formed a party and came here together. So, it was simply absurd to take anything written on this paper at face value. The jobs that they had written here were also very fishy. Being a magician was a high-class career that entailed mastery over 2 or more types of magic. In Shinji's case in particular, he had apparently learned both spirit magic and elemental magic. The guy did have noteworthy talent. The same applied to warriors, who must master weaponry and hand-to-hand combat skills. In this case, proficiency in at least one basic martial art and weapon class was to be expected. There were several weapon categories to choose from, ranging from sword fighting, archery, and in some cases, throwing arts, which included knife throwing and stone throwing. You just had to pick the one that suited you best. The essence of the art of weaponry was the path towards mastering that weapon of choice. In the case of Mark, he was evidently good at hand-to-hand combat, throwing, and fighting with a spear, jack of all trades. Lastly, hunters were said to be the cream of the crop among those who dispatched monsters. You had to master the type of archery that specialized in using the traditional bow and formite, an art that was very difficult to handle. Furthermore, you had to master the danger detection skill, and thus talent alone was not enough to get a job as a hunter. It was the most reliable occupation among the members of subjugation guilds. In this world, hardly anyone had the abilities to discover traps and monsters, which were skills essential for exploration. As such, people who could be hunters were very few, to the point that they were only born from tribes that specialized in hunting. So that made the career harder to achieve. Those three with rather rare jobs had arrived as a party. They were practically begging me to suspect them. Those three must be spies who took the bait I propose. Yes. However, would they really blow their cover this blatantly? Diablo commented, showing up out of nowhere. He had been consulting with me on the development of my magic, and was looking forward to experimenting with the new surveillance system, but was distraught about the current interruption. He looked like he was about to take out his resentment on the three people on the screen, but I guess he figured out the right call. Yeah, I said, that's what I was wondering, too. I thought it might be a diversion, but the town's security is pretty calm. This party was indeed highly suspicious, but their registration information was, quite frankly, too honest. But it may just be a red herring. Rimuru, you're overthinking it, Vildor interrupted. Didn't you say honesty is the best policy? Ramrus jumped in next. That's right. Putting that aside, it's more important to figure out how to deal with these people. Oh, that's good, you guys. Always happy-go-lucky. I envied Vildor and Ramrus for not having a care in the world. Ah, whatever. No matter what the truth was, there was no doubt that we needed to be careful. About that black-haired man wearing a lab coat, Shinji. That's obviously a fake name. It has to be Shinji. The brown-haired Mark. Not only was he throwing air bullets, he seemed to be able to throw anything that he grabbed, be it a monster corpse or a fallen stone. I nearly spat out my tea when I saw him throwing a living monster and smashing two skeleton warriors at the same time. He really was a warrior. He used the Minos' bardage skillfully and steamrolled dead spirits one after another. The black-robed guy, Sheen, definitely had an eye for detecting traps. At first, I thought that he had the skill danger detection, but seeing him avoid all the dangerous places in advance, it made me think that it was thanks to his unique skill. Essentially, beyond the 50th floor, traps were more threatening than the monsters. Undead monsters did not need to breathe, so we adjusted the air composition of this floor inside the dungeon in an unnoticeable way. I had also prepared an oxygen-free room and such, so that even an unintentional step into the room would lead to immediate asphyxiation. Besides this, there were poisonous waters, acid swamps, corrosive gas rooms, and so on. A number of really nasty traps awaited the challengers, damaging not only their bodies, but also their equipment. These traps, insidious like the character of their creators, were there to hinder the conquest of the challengers on the 50th floor and below. Yet, the traps were completely useless if the challengers could figure all of them out. In addition, Sheen had an excellent sense of direction, and it was easy for him to take the shortest paths without being fooled by the rotating floors. Obviously, the twists and turns of the labyrinth did little to slow him down. Whenever they were seriously injured, Shinji, the young man in a lab coat, would treat them. He could also break down poison, so I guess we couldn't expect much from these traps. Despite there only being 3 of them, it was as though they were specialized for conquering a dungeon. And so, 3 days passed. Vildor, Ramrus, and I were happily observing the progress Shinji and his party were making. No, we weren't thinking of them as a reference for the next time we would conquer it, okay? I mean, look at them. I was merely admiring their fights. Diablo was reading in the corner of the room, while Xian was taking lessons from Shuna on how to make desserts. Shuna poured the 3 of us another cup of tea. Today, we were having black tea with a pleasant apple scent to it. By the way, Rimuru, you said that those 3 were people who took the bait. What did you mean by that? Vildor suddenly asked. What was that? Oh, the conversation from 3 days ago. I didn't want to turn a deaf ear, but this was Vildor we were talking about. Don't worry about that. Don't give me the cold shoulder, tell me. These kinds of things normally went in one ear and out the other with him, but today, he was being remarkably persistent. Ah, fine then. Okay, I'll tell you. Actually. I explained the situation to Vildor. Taking the bait was both literal and figurative. We had introduced disaster drills. The idea behind it was to do the impossible and isolate the entire city within the dungeon. Ramrus's intrinsic skill labyrinth creation really was amazing. I knew that the floors could be swapped, but even the city above ground could be swapped with one of the floors. Once separated, it would be anchored there for 24 hours, but you didn't need to worry about water or air. In fact, even the sun was visible. It seemed that there wouldn't be much mental stress for the residents. Of course, it needed a lot of power, and that's where Valdorus came into the picture. That was why I had been planning to isolate the town when the war came. We had practiced it a few times, and unexpectedly, it turned out to be excellent bait for spies. Since the gate, which was the entrance to the labyrinth, would be the only thing left above the ground, it was bound to raise a few eyebrows. Investigations would surely be carried out. This was the conclusion we reached in a meeting with Benimaru and others. I see. Thanks to Mentor, I've also gotten a power-up. I'm glad to be of help. Kukuku, I see. Thanks to me, Havildora grinned, giving me those puppy eyes he does when fishing for compliments. It was a pain in the ass, but I had to hand it to him. We couldn't have done it without him. Well, you really helped, Valdorus-san. Gahahaha. Ain't that right? You all heard it. So, could you give me the cake? Of course I can't. That was the piece I had saved for later. Then, have mine. Boo, thanks Diablo. Sorry about that, I apologize. No, it's the least I can do for you, Rimuru-sama, Diablo assured me. How reliable. I may as well indulge in his kindness.